Our history and destiny are shaped by our diseases. The origins of our ills are complex, mysterious, and surprising. And they must be understood if we are to avoid always being plagued. We've created most of our diseases for ourselves through the way we live. Once released, these diseases have then become silent soldiers in history. Powerful forces which have in large part dictated the human map of the world today. It's a fascinating interwoven story involving greed, our immunity, and our vulnerability to these diseases, to these invisible armies.
Hi, this is Lisa from Lisa and Culture. Measles isn't just one of those kids' diseases. It's serious. Measles
can make your child blind or retarded. It can lead to pneumonia, swelling of the brain, or even death. Right now, measles is infecting hundreds of...
Measles is one of the diseases which help draw the map of the world. It kills children in vast numbers in developing countries. But it's a disease which still threatens we who live in so-called advanced nations. Despite immunization, measles is on its way back in cities like Los Angeles because it's so easy to overwhelm the fragile protection of medicine.
People forget how serious a disease measles is. Measles lasts about 10 days, and it's associated with very significant symptoms: high fever, severe cough, severe runny nose, and red and painful eyes. And that's just the routine case of measles. We saw in the peak 6 months of the epidemic last year, from January through June, we saw 440 cases of measles here at Children's Hospital alone. And about 40% of those children, 45% of those children were admitted to hospital. 3 of them died due to pulmonary complications, lung complications, the infection. I'm angry because the illnesses that we are concerned about today, that we're talking about, are entirely preventable. We don't have to see the numbers of cases of measles and tuberculosis that we're seeing.
The first one? Really? Yeah. Okay. Can you please hold this, lady?
Measles is preventable by a simple injection.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This one's I'm sorry. Don't forget to find one child.
But relatively few Hispanic children are being immunized. The health workers in this clinic are going round trying to find who haven't had their shots and convince parents to have their children injected on the spot. The mothers haven't had it done till now because they can't afford health care. The free clinics are far from where they live. They're scared of being caught as illegal migrants. The measles epidemic in LA is a warning that poverty and alienation can knock away the foundations of community health.
Measles is, as you would say, waving a red flag, some kind of signal to say, look at everyone, I'm the first one, I'm the most contagious. When vaccination levels fall this much, I'm going to be popping my head out, and children are going to start getting measles. If you let it fall any further, children are going to be having diphtheria, pertussis. Last year, we already had a rubella epidemic, which is also very contagious, and you need high levels in order to have herd immunity. So it definitely, it's much more than there was a measles epidemic. There was an immunization crisis, failure to get children vaccinated over a period of probably the last 3 to 5 years. And that's just the very first warning signal that if we don't do something now, we're going to have a lot bigger problems on our hands, like another epidemic of diphtheria or whooping cough.
What's the next epidemic we're going to see? Are we going to see an outbreak of polio? Are we going to start seeing tetanus or diphtheria occurring in these populations? We already are seeing tuberculosis increasing in incidence in many cities across the United States.
So when the defenses of an advanced nation fail, the old diseases recur, and not just in the poor. Problems with immunization are also showing up amongst white, affluent Americans. And it's an irony, since measles is one of the diseases which made America white. Measles was part of an invisible army. It was a terrible army drafted out of human history. In addition to measles, there were diseases like yellow fever, malaria, and smallpox. In our sanitized Western world, we've forgotten what an infection such as smallpox looked like. This is a story of conquest, where the conqueror's silent weapons were the diseases they inflicted on others. And to understand the origins of these diseases, in fact of these invisible armies, we have to go back to where human existence began, to Africa. The dawn of humankind was in the African savanna, near the forests where we'd evolved. Africa has also been where many diseases began. Our ancestors, 50,000 years ago, were more part of the natural environment than they would ever be again. Living in small groups, people survived by hunting and gathering, and were well-nourished, tall and fit. There weren't enough humans around then for there to be exclusively human diseases. The great store of infections lay in the animals and insects around them. They suffered from parasites in the raw meat they ate. And there was malaria, one of the most ancient of our ills, which started in forest primates and was transmitted from person to person by mosquitoes. Humans multiplied. They moved on to new lands. Europe and Asia had different animals and insects, so people walked into new diseases and left some of the old ones behind. About 12,000 years ago, during an ice age, intrepid and no doubt cold hunter-gatherers crossed a land bridge into what's now Alaska, and they entered a virgin continent which was remarkably disease-free. Soon the ice retreated, and America was isolated again. Around 8,000 years ago, new deserts formed. What had been woodland became the Sahara, putting up a barrier to tropical Africa. Then we fundamentally changed the way we lived. In the well-watered valleys of the Fertile Crescent, the Nile and the Indus, farming began. Farming was to have an enormous impact on human diseases. The hunters and gatherers domesticated animals. Then they settled and began planting domesticated grasses like wheat and rice. This was the beginning of great civilizations like Egypt and Sumeria. People settled in larger numbers than ever before. They lived in cramped contact with animals, and the herd and human germs flowed backwards and forwards with an unprecedented intensity. Measles and smallpox evolved from animal infections, like distemper and monkeypox, and became infections which only existed in humans. Smallpox and measles were crowd diseases because they needed plenty of human fuel to survive. So 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, in the desperately unhealthy cities of the Near East, people would have experienced measles as a new epidemic. Everywhere there was livestock, markets, slaughterhouses, tanneries, an environment full of living and dead animals, a paradise for germs. These cities were dangerous places, stumps for humankind. Innocent people who were virgin to the crowd diseases migrated from the countryside only to perish in the maelstrom of infection.